You're listening to Physician Non-Clinical Careers, episode 321, How to Market Your Surgical and Non-Surgical Careers Like a Pro. Today's guest first appeared on the show in August of 2018, in episode number 49. He was quite a groundbreaker at the time when it came to using social media and a podcast to market his practice and educate patients. Since then, he's continued to try new ways to connect with patients. He's a speaker and a media personality locally and nationally. So I'm really happy to bring him back on the podcast today. Before we get to that, however, let's thank today's sponsor, Sandro Consulting, and its proven telehealth training program called From Here to There, Leveraging Virtual Medicine. Are you ready to say goodbye to burnout, take control of your schedule, increase your earnings, and enjoy more quality time with your family? You're probably wondering how to do that without spending years getting a new certification or learning a whole new set of non-clinical skills. And as we've discussed before, the quickest way to achieve more freedom like that and joy in your life is to leverage virtual medicine. Dr. Sharisa Sandro and I discussed this in podcast episode number 266, which if you'd like, you can listen to at nonclinicalphysicians.com/266. Sharisa and her team are now preparing to relaunch their comprehensive program for building and running your own telehealth business. If you want to learn the tools and skills you need to live life on your own terms, then you should check it out today. After completing the 10-week program, you'll be ready to take your career to the next level. The program starts very soon, and there are a limited number of openings. So please learn more by going to nonclinicalphysicians.com/freedom, because this is the quickest way to exit assembly line medicine. Again, check out the program at nonclinicalphysicians.com/freedom. I would also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge our longstanding show sponsor, the University of Tennessee Executive MBA program. The UT Pemba is the longest running and most highly respected physician-only executive MBA in the country, and it's produced more than 700 graduates. The Haslam College of Business was recently ranked number 1 in the world by Economist Magazine as the most relevant executive MBA program. And it's a program that only takes 2 years to complete. And you'll also complete a company project while you're in the program, so you can really demonstrate the skills you're learning to your colleagues and maybe to your boss. Graduates have taken leadership positions at major healthcare organizations and have become entrepreneurs and business owners. So if you want to acquire new business and management skills and advance your non-clinical career, then contact Dr. Kate Ashley's office at 865-974-6526 or use our handy link at nonclinicalphysicians.com/physician MBA. Okay, so non-clinical nation, let's find out how to market like a pro, to become a recognized speaker, and to use YouTube to create a solid online presence with hundreds of videos to attract business to your company, to your practice, or anything else you're doing. Today's guest, Dr. David Geier, is a local media personality with thousands of television appearances. And as a podcaster, he posted over 400 podcast episodes. He's a triple board certified orthopedist who has shifted his approach to sports injuries and chronic joint problems over the past few years. And I think you'll be inspired by his approach to his career and his life. And you'll learn some things about pursuing your goals and building a life you really love. So let's get to our conversation with David Geier. Today's guest first appeared on the podcast here in August of 2018. That was episode 49. That was a long time ago. And he was quite a groundbreaker then, in terms of he was using social media. He had a podcast. He was using other platforms to basically to market himself and his business and his practice. But since then, he's continued to do new things, break new ground, and even sort of shifted his clinical activities a little bit. So I definitely wanted to get today's guest back to the podcast. So with that, Dr. David Geier, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me. I cannot believe it's been that long. I did remember that it was before COVID, but I just did not remember it being 5 years ago. It is amazing. That's scary how quickly time seems to pass.
Well, usually when people say that, it's because they're so damn busy that it just goes
Yeah,
by like that, you know?
yeah, that's a good point. Absolutely.
Because I know you've been into doing a lot of different things. It's going to be great to hear about it. So I don't want to reiterate everything that we said at the last, but give us a little thumbnail of back when you were in practice, why you kind of jumped into social media,
Yeah.
and why your practice was really a little different from most other orthopedists in terms of connecting with patients. And then we'll get into the more recent stuff.
Well, it was interesting. Way back in 2008 or so, I was running a sports medicine program at an academic medical center here in Charleston. And anybody that's worked in academics knows, I'm trying to build a sports medicine program and I'm trying to work with marketing to get more exposure. We need dollars to get team relationships and various components to help us grow. But in academics, you have to go through all these different layers to then a lot of times get a no. But the person that was sort of spearheading musculoskeletal health and the musculoskeletal program at that program sort of talked to me and said, hey, I think you'd be great at social media. And this is back when really Twitter and Facebook were just starting. And she's like, you should do a website and you should do Twitter and Facebook. And I had no idea, like, what in the world? I'm a surgeon. I cut on people. I stand on the sidelines at football games. And she's like, no, I think you'd be great. I hear you talk to people about injuries. And so sort of clueless to the whole thing, I was like, all right, I'll give it a try, not knowing at all, one, how much time I was going to end up putting into it, but then how much I would enjoy sharing information, not just one-on-one with a patient, but one on 100, one on 1,000, because it could be seen not just by tons of people, obviously, but at different points in time. They didn't have to watch it live. They could see it later. And so many people commented over years, and it ballooned into this thing because so many people went to see a doctor and they'd tell me, I had no idea what he said. I didn't understand a word he said or why she said that's the only option I had. And so your articles and your videos or your podcasts, like I used to do back then, were so helpful, and it sort of ballooned. You get this positive feedback, and then you network with other physicians, and in my world, athletic trainers and physical therapists, and it just became this community, and it just took off. It started as a way to grow that sports medicine program, but it very quickly sort of peeled away from that a little bit. And it turned into writing a regular newspaper column for the Charleston newspaper. It turned into very, very frequent TV interviews and radio interviews down here, and just so many different opportunities. And it honestly, it took on a life of its own and became something that was taking me 20, 30 plus, sometimes more hours a week. And then I had to sort of navigate those challenges. But I don't regret it for a minute. I feel proud that I was sort of on the leading edge of that. I will say that as I've backed off a little bit, not completely, we'll talk about that, but there are people that have sort of taken that baton and run. But it was really, really cool that I kind of got into it having literally no idea what I was getting myself into. But it turned into something that, quite honestly, not only changed my career, but it changed my life.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I remember, I think back in that episode, because I was listening back to it a little while ago. I mean, I think you had said at that point you had already done 1,000 media presentations or, jobs. I guess we're talking about vignettes of when people interview you or do something like that,
Yeah.
right?
It's probably over 3,500 now, because now I'm the chief medical expert for 2 TV stations here, and I'm on every day, sometimes 3-4 times a day in recorded segments. So yeah, but back then when it was one-off things, reporters would reach out to me for, it was a lot of time. I don't regret it. I love communicating and, doing interviews in Spokane, Washington, and all these places. A lot of things I never would have guessed came of it. And it's great. It still is great.
One of the questions I always get is like, as a quote, whatever it is, as a dermatologist, as a orthopedist, can I really do that kind of thing? And I guess my question to you is, I don't think you're just talking about ortho. You're the resource for at least some of these places, just for anything medical. Is that right?
I don't get as much medical, even though I do get more of that now. And we're going to talk about my practice pivot here in a little bit, but I do get a little bit because people see me on TV, and as my role as chief medical expert for those two TV stations, I'm talking about all kinds of medical topics. Right. So I probably do get more that way, but even online, I still focus primarily on orthopedics and sports medicine. But you're right. And I've heard this from other physicians that are active in social media. Once people become comfortable with you, whether it's watching your videos or reading your articles, it's just natural for them to say, hey, by the way, I've got X problem or X condition. And it does sometimes get away from kind of what you do. I've always found that interesting, that people reach out to physicians they don't even know, but they do know them in a way because they've spent time listening to a podcast, watching their videos, reading their articles. And I think there's something really valuable about that. I hear so many physicians talk about how much time they're going to put into it. But part of the reason, so many of us went into medicine is to help people. This is just a different way to do that. It's not that one's better than the other. It's just a different way to reach people and help people.
Now, are you to the point now where, so many people are reaching out to you, or you're already committed to do these kind of regular interviews, or a short speech or something? Are you still promoting yourself in newer ways? Like, are you doing anything on social media, or is that gone in another direction? How's that working?
No, that's a great question, because I'm the king of like, try this, see if it works. If it works, keep doing it. If it doesn't work, bail. So there's a whole lot of things that I have done for a little while and stopped. But then there's a lot of things I kept up with. One of my podcasts, the Dr. David Geier Show, I think I got to like 420 episodes, got it up to right close to COVID. And then I was just decided, hey, let's move on. YouTube has been a consistent for me since 2015 or something. I've got close to 100,000 followers. So I've been very consistent there, but I've dabbled in a lot of things. I tried TikTok videos for a little while. I tried YouTube Shorts and Instagram Reels. I might go back to that at some point. It was a lot of work for something I wasn't feeling like I was getting that much out of. I did try a podcast about 1.5 2 years ago that was a live show that then I turned into a podcast. And that was a lot of fun to do, especially live, but it was a lot of work, and I wasn't feeling like I was getting that. That's when I was sort of in a trying to promote my new practice mode, and it wasn't helping me there. So I sort of scaled that back. I might go back to that because I really like the live interaction that you can do now with live streaming and things. So there's a lot of different things that I've tried, but right now it's focusing YouTube mostly, and then the traditional media that I do that I used to put on social media as well, but that just got there gets to a point where if you create so much content, you sort of overwhelm viewers, overwhelm readers. So I'm sort of cognizant of that too. And I'm on TV so much here locally that if I put that out on Twitter every day or X every day, I'd drive everybody crazy.
Now, I know my listeners are going to have these kind of questions, so I'm going to substitute for them. So on any of the YouTube stuff, so that's kind of your main thing now in terms of connecting with patients and clients and people in general, teaching. Are you doing any monetization of YouTube, passive or active or anything like that?
I do. And I will say I did resist that for a long time. I probably, I had a couple of videos on my YouTube channel early, but I really started in earnest, really going at it weekly, sometimes more than weekly, in 2015. And I probably didn't start monetizing it until maybe 2019, 2020, somewhere in there. And I thought long and hard about it. I grew my channel to 20 or 30,000 before I started monetizing it. And it wasn't as much to make money. I'm not going to lie. I don't get that much from it when you hear of these other people that are making tens of thousands a month or more. It is nothing like that. But it was a way to, as much as anything, just help me. I put way more in expenses you can't see, but I've got a whole TV studio here in this office with 4 key lights. I've got a hair light. I've got a preamp, a DSLR camera, a boom mic. All that stuff costs money. I have a virtual assistant that helps me edit the videos and put captions, and all that stuff just costs money. So, the amount I get from YouTube every month doesn't come close to covering any of that, but it helps a little bit. And honestly, I don't think, just for a short 5-second ad at the beginning of videos, I feel like Otherwise, I'm giving, even though it's not specific medical advice, and I'm very specific about that in my YouTube videos, essentially they are getting advice in the sense they're getting information about what an injury is that's a little, honestly, better than just reading a WebMD article or Mayo Clinic article. So I don't feel that bad about it. But again, I went a long time saying, no, what, I don't want to do that. And that's how I justified it. I'm not saying I'm right. That was just my thought process.
No, I think it makes sense. Let me ask you then, I'll shift gears to the speaking, because you're being interviewed, you're doing, presentations and so forth. So do you do any paid speaking?
I do keynote speaking where I don't do any medical speak. Well, I do have a burnout talk, a physician burnout talk, because I've been through that myself. But I don't do any like Pfizer or well, Pfizer wouldn't be something for orthopedics, but Arthrex sends you out to talk about a surgical technique and implants and stuff. I don't do any of that kind of paid speaking, but I do keynote speeches on burnout or leadership or personal excellence. And I'll get, a few $1,000s in travel paid for by some of those. I don't do a lot of that. I was actually doing a lot right before COVID. And then obviously COVID killed the speaking industry. Yeah. That's starting to open back up, but I do it more if it's the right opportunity, not necessarily to make money, because it's hard to leave your practice and leave your family. It's really if it's a good opportunity with a good audience and an audience that would be receptive, especially to the burnout message. That's why I do it. The fee is more than anything just to sort of reimburse me for the cost and time of leaving my family and practice.
Well, you mentioned the burnout, and talking about burnout, that kind of intrigued me. Now, I don't remember if your burnout occurred before we spoke last time or since, but tell me just a little bit about that. And, what do you think about it, and what are you noticing now? Because, this has been a big issue even before the pandemic. I think it exploded during the pandemic. So I'd just like to get your perspective and on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was way before we did our podcast. This was back at like 2012, 2013, toward the end of my 8 years at that academic medical center. I was working really hard at just trying to build a sports medicine program and run it, doing all of that work I was talking about social media wise as well, sort of on top of that. And then, as a lot of us in medicine know, there were a lot of changes going on back then that weren't necessarily what I wanted as a physician. I had a stable OR team, and we got this new OR manager that made all the surgeons' lives hell. And there was just a lot going on. So it was external change compounded with me just running myself into the ground. And I hit this situation where I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating well, I wasn't spending time with my kids, and I was just miserable. I was getting angry all the time, and I couldn't really figure out why. And I had that awful OR nurse manager finally, I won't tell the whole story, but sort of opened my eyes that I was the problem. Now, to be fair, she was a lot of the problem, and she ended up getting fired. But I realized that there was some truth to that I was responsible for a lot of this stuff that happened. And so I had to make changes to myself that took about 18 months, committing to getting more sleep and committing to saying no to a lot of things and committing to delegating stuff that I shouldn't be doing, committing to spending time with my kids no matter what. If that meant not attending faculty meetings so I could go to my kids' soccer game, so be it. I ended up actually leaving that academic institution about a year later. But it took me a long time to get through that burnout. And to your point, we are seeing more and more, even unrelated to COVID. As you are well aware, this started even before COVID. All the electronic medical records changes, the hospital ownership of practice and being pushed to see more patients in less time, and having to do more and more of the tasks ourselves as physicians that, to be fair, anybody could do. You don't necessarily need a physician, but that's all time that's on physicians, keeping them away from their families and away from hobbies and things. So it is getting worse. But fortunately, there is more of an attention on this now, not just the physicians and them making their own changes, but I do get the sense that hospitals and these institutions care and are trying to make changes, but it's hard. You got bottom line financial interests, and then you've got physician well-being interests, and where that balance is, it's not going to be the same at any institution, but where that's going to play a large role in what medicine looks like over the next 10 years. I really believe that may drive if it continues the way it's going, people out of medicine or to, like an integrative practice, cash-based practice, or we're going to get a handle on this and we're going to figure out ways to help physicians be quality physicians, but also have healthy lives.
Well, I'm kind of encouraged a little bit that you've noticed at least some more recognition of this. When I've asked other colleagues in the past, like, okay, so tell me a couple of hospitals that you're familiar with that have now taken, burnout seriously. That's like a big zero, or they started a program and it really, it was trying to teach resilience. And it's like, well, I'm already working 18 hours a day, and why being more resilient? How is that going to help? Those kind of things.
Yeah.
But,
and so every institution is different. There's no question. I have absolutely heard what you're talking about when I give speeches and these people come up to me and they're like, God, I left medicine because I experienced I tell my story and they like, I know exactly what you're feeling. And I hear from medical students saying, I'm really worried this is going to happen to me. But I do see evidence that it's starting to change. I hear of hospital systems where they spend the money to get scribes for physicians just to help them get out the door before it's dark outside. And there's a variety of different things, a lot more meet and greets, just because I think relationship between physicians, connections and communities and getting to know each other is so important. And I see a lot of hospital systems really working on that. And I think that's a good thing. So there are some trying, but as you're saying, yes, there's a long, long way to go.
When you're asked to speak on that topic, it's usually a group of doctors. Is it usually a residency? Is it a hospital? What's your experience?
I've never gotten asked by a residency. That's actually really good. It tends to be either medical organization. So like I did MGMA, the practice managers groups not that long ago, which was really good because they're the ones that now will go and implement some of the suggestions I talked about. But a lot of times it's more medical societies. It'll be the Society of Neurology, or, I'm not going to say specific ones, or, it'll be a county medical society in some big city that can bring me in. I like it when there's some way to access medical students and residents, but unfortunately, I don't get that opportunity much. But when I have had that opportunity, I think that's where it's really important, because if you can sort of go into medicine saying, hey, I'm going to prioritize my well-being, I'm still going to take good care of patients, but I know what potentially can happen if I run myself into the ground and allow myself to be run into the ground. I think that's better. I think the challenge comes to those of us that have been medicine for years and years or decades, and we've always done things a certain way, and now we're being forced to change. I'm hoping the medical students that didn't sort of have rigid patterns already, maybe they'll be able to adjust to the new world of medicine. And it is very new compared to what you and I probably trained under. I really hope the medical students, it's a different battle for them than what the people that started a while ago really dealt with.
Yeah, I hope so too. We're going to segue into what you're doing now a little bit more, what's different now about your practice and so forth. But I want to mention your website because I hate to wait to the end in case someone doesn't listen to the end. So it's DrDavid.com, right?
Yeah, DrDavid, and then nobody gets the spelling wrong, but I own every domain name of any possible way you can misspell it. So you'll end up on it. Dr. David Geier, DrDavid, Geier is how I spell it. And then all the social media is that same handle at DrDavid, Geier. Doesn't matter what the platform is. But yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Yeah, and if somebody wants to get motivated to do something, I'd say look you up on YouTube and find your channel because it just shows you what you can do if you just spend a little time to organize and get in front of the camera.
And it isn't hard. That's what so many people like, I could never speak on camera. I could never write. Just start. If you read my first articles, they were horrendous. My first few newspaper columns were god awful. I mean, really bad. My first few YouTube videos, really, really bad, not just from a tech standpoint, but I was terrible. But it's reps. The more I bet, and this is no criticism of you, but I bet your first few podcasts are nothing like they are now. No. And I just start, and you don't have to do every day of the week, literally once a week, and you batch them, you do 4 at a time, and you get a month's worth done all at once. Just start. I really believe, maybe not everybody, but so many physicians, once you start, you may find you actually like it and like communicating in this sort of online world. I think it's really gratifying.
Yeah, I think, if you listen to my first few podcasts, yeah, that would be kind of hard to listen to, but we learn over time and it becomes just natural after a while.
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised how much you think you don't have anything to say, but it's really not. If you learn certain tricks and how to brainstorm in that, I mean, you could probably sit down and come up with 20 topics yourself right now and sit down in front of a camera and do it, just because people are asking you questions and you can answer those questions. And that's basically what we're doing.
That absolutely is one of the best brainstorming ideas you can have. Literally keep a sheet of paper somewhere or a notebook. When people ask you questions, especially if you hear the same question 2 or 3 times in clinic, do a video or do an article on that, because I promise people are Google searching for that or searching on YouTube for that. And that's easily the best source of content you could ever have, is just what are your patients asking you?
Yeah, absolutely. Great advice. Now, tell us what you're doing now that's different from what you started doing the first, I don't know, 10 years or so of because it does have some new aspects to it. So I'm really anxious to hear about that. And I'll probably have to pick your brain about some clinical issues.
Yeah. So I practiced for 16 years as what I call a traditional orthopedic surgeon. You have an orthopedic injury. Very often you fix it surgically, put it back together, that kind of thing, and loved it. Sports medicine, so it's mostly arthroscopic surgery. But just over 2 years ago, I pivoted to basically get away from surgery into what I call anti-aging orthopedics. I joined a practice where I was actually a patient myself. That was integrative medical practice with, they do a lot of hormone replacement but they, a lot of things to preventative medicine and just feel better, obviously live longer, but feel better as you live longer. My doctor actually helped me through that burnout phase. I realized I was low in a bunch of different health markers. So we've really worked to get that fixed. But then I realized, man, there's a lot of things out here that are available that you just can't use in traditional medicine and traditional orthopedics, because it's either considered experimental by the FDA or it is approved by the FDA, but you have to use it off label. And so she talked to me and said, hey, would you like to come on as bone and joint health? So she and another doctor do, again, integrative medicine. It's sort of all different aspects of medicine, but for a lot of those patients have arthritis. They have other joint pain and things like that. And so I was a little nervous about leaving traditional medicine and insurance-based medicine and surgery. But I made the leap, maybe a little early, but I don't regret it now. But getting away from surgery and trying to help people avoid surgery with some of these anti-aging and regenerative medicine techniques. I even spent a year, we were talking about this before we started, spent a year studying for my anti-aging and regenerative medicine boards. Had to take a written exam, had to do an oral exam, which was just awful because I don't remember cardiovascular medicine and all. I had to learn all these different types of medicine all over again. But it was well worth it. At least at the time I got that certification in September of last year, 2022, I was only the second orthopedic surgeon in the country to have that board certification. But it's been great. I get to work. 40% of my patients fly in or travel in to see me here in Charleston, South Carolina. It's great. It's a big shift. I missed surgery a little bit, but I realized not that much. And I'm really grateful because I can hopefully help a decent percentage of people not need that surgery, not just now, but hopefully down the road. So it was a big change. And that's been really the last 2.5 years of my life.
Now, is the work that you're doing in that regard, does it still require a medical license? Are you doing injections? Are you doing other things like that? Or
yeah, no, it's all still medical license. And yeah, it's still all, now 3 board certifications, but I suppose some of the stuff that I don't do, when people think of regenerative medicine, people typically think stem cells. I don't really do stem cells, even though there are some orthopedic surgeons that do it. There's some things about stem cells that I think make it not terribly effective as a treatment here in the US, at least for orthopedics. But some of the things that we do, some non-physicians do, osteopaths and things like that, they don't tend to, at least as far as orthopedic conditions, really know what they're treating. Not all, but a lot. They just have their one preferred treatment. They use it over and over and over with people, and I'm not a big fan of that. But yeah, it's all very well researched. It's not just, hey, let's just try this and see if it works, but it involves things like peptides and some regenerative treatments, maybe like exosomes or PRP modalities. We have hyperbaric oxygen chambers in our practice. We have shockwave and a number of other different things. Off-label medications to stop the damage in arthritis and things like that, and a lot of combination treatments. So not just one thing over and over, but different things based on the problems and the specific nature of the patient. We have our own pharmacy that's regulated by the state pharmacy board, and we use FDA-approved compounding pharmacies for the raw ingredients that our pharmacy uses and things like that. So I think it's great. I'm glad I didn't have to set it up. The doctor that started the practice started it 20 years ago. And so it's a well-oiled machine now, but there's a lot to it. I'm very fortunate that I was invited to be a part of it. But I do think that that's largely where we'll see if orthopedics heads there. But I think all of medicine is sort of, or at least a lot of it is headed that way. And the burnout thing was really interesting because so many of the integrative medicine physicians I'm meeting, that's largely why they left their insurance-based practices, is burnout type issues. So I'm curious to see if burnout drives a huge growth in integrative medicine, cash-based medicine, preventative medicine. I don't know. We'll see. That wasn't really the reason I did it, but that's what I'm hearing from other physicians that are getting into that world.
Yeah, it sounds like a little bit like the people I've talked to that have gone into functional medicine, and so there's also some other things like that. It's where they can still be a physician, and some of those things they're not necessarily they're more of a consultant, but they get to use that physician brain and help clients, help patients, and get some improvement. Well, maybe I should ask this next question after we get offline, but I'm going to ask it now and we can always cut it out. Have you seen in your new, in this new realm, anything fantastic treatment for what we used to call pseudo gout, or what is it, CPPD or something, calcinosis? I don't know. I know someone that has it, and it's, it's kind of like people throw arthritis meds at them and rheumatoid meds, but I'm not sure anything has been shown to work. Any updates on that?
I have not seen any studies specifically on any of the treatments that we use specifically for pseudo gout, or like you say, CPPD. It would not surprise me if some of the medications that do seem to be very helpful at stopping the damage in osteoarthritis, and I'm happy to get into the science of this, but I don't think you want to really do a science podcast. But things like penisin polysulfate or metformin or rapamycin, all of which seem to be good in arthritis at least stopping the problem. I do wonder if that would help in pseudo gout, but I'm not aware of any studies specifically on that problem. I mean, we're just now over the last 2 or 3 years starting to get studies on osteoarthritis, which affects more than 32 million people in this country. So it's something that's not nearly as common. I think that's going to be that data is going to take a lot longer, but I do wonder if in the same way that it works for arthritis, it might at least be helpful for pseudo gout.
I think a lot of the approaches that are being discovered and applied, that aren't surgical and aren't traditional medicine are, have beneficial effects that we don't know and understand fully. And that means to me that they're going to be working for things that those other areas just didn't ever have a solution for, at least to date. So that's
it's exciting. I think it's medicine, at least what's going on in the labs, it's progressing very quickly. The challenge is a lot of times the research is coming along faster than the regulatory bodies can examine that evidence. And so there's a lot of things that seem to work very well that the FDA, through no fault of their own, just hasn't gotten around to sort of dealing with. And so, you hear the patients, the general public say, hey, we're so far behind Europe. And it's good and bad in some ways. Obviously, you want to make everything safe for people, but it is also leading to this growth of the integrative and functional medicine physicians, who I really do think generally try to keep an eye on the research and don't push the envelope too far. But unfortunately, I think then you do have people that, hey, I can make cash for this and make a lot of money, maybe non-physicians that do push it too far. And so it's really an interesting space. It'll really be interesting to see how this plays out over the next decade or so.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what happens, and I'm going to keep looking for guests to come on and tell me more about it in the future. So that was a good introduction for us. Do you have a few more minutes? Well, I have one more
Yeah.
thing I want to ask you
Yeah,
about,
absolutely.
because you somewhere in something I read, or maybe it was our conversation, you mentioned AI, and I don't know too many physicians have integrated it even into writing an article, much less anything else. But I think you have used certain types of AI tools for some of what you do.
Yeah, I actually played around with the tool. I was sort of an early adopter, and there's a million AI tools. Everybody knows Chat GPT, but of one that, and I have no relationship other than I pay money to use it. And there's probably better ones now, but I used one called Copy AI. And to be fair, so I haven't gone so far as to say, all right, I'm going to let it write a video script for me, or I'm going to let it write a blog post. I know they can do that. I've kind of tried it out just to see what it creates. But where I've found AI to be helpful, we were talking, this is going to sound completely cheesy, but it works. You were talking about great ways to brainstorm, and we were talking about writing down questions patients ask. But literally, I mean, you can make, depending on how you organize the tool and its search function and how you set it up, give me 10 topic ideas for blog posts about pseudo gout or something like that. And it'll spit out common symptoms, things that you honestly could do. But I mean, you can generate, you could brainstorm 50 topics in a heartbeat. I do know physicians. I was for a short period of time in this mentorship of cash-based physicians in various parts of the country and various specialties. And the guy that ran it was a big proponent of using AI. And some of the people in that group tried it, and they write all of their blog posts using AI, and they'll just change grammar words and things like that. It is that good when you remember that you're writing in layman's terms. You do not want to write, I would argue, in very, very detailed scientific terms, because the average person will read your blog post and have no idea what you're talking about. Right. And AI does a pretty good job of translating it into English, but you have to be using these tools and that's why I don't know that Chat GPT was terrible. The times I tried it was terribly helpful, but like Copy AI, and I know there's others, it can generate a bullet point of like an outline for a topic, and then within each bullet point, a few points within that, and you cross out the ones you don't want, and you rearrange the ones, and then it'll generate a script or a blog post, and then you can edit that, and it's surprisingly good. But at the end of the day, you as a physician sort of need to keep an eye on it, read it, make sure that it's technically right and that it makes sense to the reader or viewer or listener. But it is amazing what's out there. I'm not going to say that it replaces us, but it can do a lot of the heavy lifting. And when we're talking about creating content, I've been amazed. I don't know how I'll necessarily use AI going into my actual practice, but at least from every now and then I need to come up with something. Yeah, I think it can be helpful.
Yeah, I think for people that are thinking about a blog, a podcast, an online course, anything that requires creating, content, particularly if it's repetitive. I mean, I haven't had a lot of experience with it, but I know that one of my team sometimes uses it. I can tell it's an AI thing because I read it and I go, okay. But all I do is I just chop up the sentences and I put it in my own voice, and that saved me 80-90% of the time. So it's another no excuse for not doing this stuff. Like, you don't have the time. It'll take you 2 minutes to just edit this thing.
Yeah, it really is impressive. It'll sit, you could have it write a 500-word article, and you can tell, because it may repeat a point, maybe different words, but it's basically saying the same thing, or it seems out of order because I don't know how well it sort of thinks through a human train of thought. But it's surprisingly good. I mean, if you said, generate a 500-word blog post on pseudo gout, literally 10 seconds, and there it is. And then you just go behind it. I mean, I don't want to necessarily encourage you to defer the whole content creation to AI, but it is a good start. If you've got writer's block and you like, what am I going to write about? That's another way to at least get started.
Yeah, I think we're just scratching the surface. I heard something on the radio or somewhere where somebody told some type of AI to write a 500-page screenplay, and 5 minutes later they had it, and they said it wasn't bad. It was a really good screenplay. Like, okay, this is crazy.
Where I think it'll be interesting, and I am not an expert on EMRs, electronic medical records, at all, but I do wonder when AI is starting to be used for EMRs. I think there's a lot of potential with that in terms of improving our lives. Obviously, the information's got to be accurate and all that, but I think there is potential that AI could be really useful. And I say that as an outsider to these systems, but I actually think it could be very helpful. Just what I've seen in the social media content world, I've got to believe there's a way to make it useful for physicians in just documenting clinic visits and hospital visits and things like that.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it, but now that you mention it, it just seems like it, with the right tweaks and the right protections, it could be one of the solutions to this dreadful EMR that we have to work
and there's money to be made in it, which makes me think it's already being worked on. That because everybody knows the EMR issue is a huge issue, and the EMR companies, there's a lot of money for them to be made if people pivot to them because it's easy to use. So it's coming for sure.
Oh my gosh, life is changing. I can't imagine what's going to be like 5 years from now. Okay, well, I don't want to take up any more of your time. This has been very interesting. We've covered a lot of topics. Your life has been very interesting. We'll probably have to circle back in another 4 or 5 years. Okay, just tell us again how to get in touch with you, how to follow you, the best places.
Yeah, the best place is my website, drdavidgeier.com. There's a contact form. I'd love to hear from you if you are listening to this podcast, even if it's just to say, hey, I want to start doing content. I'd love to just know other people that are content providers. So reach out. I get comments and questions from all over the world. So I love interacting. The links to my social media are on my website, but everywhere, every platform, it's DRDAVIDGEIER, whether that's X, which I actually love consuming. I don't post that much there, but I love consuming YouTube. I'm obviously on Instagram and Facebook. Definitely reach out. Love to meet physicians that are starting to get into the podcasting and video creation. I just love it. I think that I wish we could all do it, quite honestly.
Yeah, there's a lot of good to it if you find a good niche that you like. So, hey, I really appreciate the comments today and everything you've shared with us. And with that, I guess I'll just thank you and say goodbye.
Oh, absolutely. I really, really enjoyed it. And I hope we can do it in another 4 or 5 years. And I'll be curious where medicine is and where you and I are at that point.
All right. Bye-bye.
Take care.
A lot has changed in David's life since we spoke almost 5 years ago. He has shifted gears and really made a major shift in his medical practice. He's still helping thousands of patients through his speaking, educating, and social media productions. And he's very interested in sharing what he knows with others. So feel free to access his website at drdavidgeier.com. That's DRDAVIDGEIER.com. And follow his YouTube channel. Just look up his name on YouTube to get ideas about what he presents and how he presents it. You can find those links, related links, show notes, and a transcript for the episode at nonclinicalphysicians.com/how-to-market. Those are hyphenated. Remember that the podcast is made possible by the support of the University of Tennessee Physician Executive MBA program. You can learn more about that at nonclinicalphysicians.com/physician MBA. And don't forget that the quickest way to jump off the healthcare hamster wheel, achieve more freedom, and increase your income is to leverage virtual medicine. Sandro Consulting is relaunching its comprehensive program for building and running your own telehealth business called From Here to There, Leveraging Virtual Medicine. And the next cohort starts in a few days. Remind you today that the opinions expressed here are mine and my guests. And while the information provided on the podcast is true and accurate to the best of my knowledge, there's no guarantee that using the methods discussed will lead to success in your career, life, or business. So always consult an attorney, accountant, or career counselor or a career strategist before making any major decision about your career. And I hope to see you here next Tuesday for another episode of Physician Non-Clinical Careers. Bye-bye now.